It's real. It's real. You know the deal. You know the deal. Come on.
Hey, it's Shanté.
And I'm Natalie, and welcome to What's the Deal, a podcast powered by the Norfus Firm. At the Norfus Firm, we solve people problems, and we have the great pleasure of working with employers all over the world on human resources, DEI, and workplace culture strategy. Hey, girl, hey.
Hey, how's it going?
You know, it's good because we got vacation starting tomorrow, and it's just this day in between us and a beach. So
Amazing. Can't wait. Can't
no,
wait. Can't wait. Can't wait. Almost there. Is it less than 24 hours? I think it's less than 24 hours
it is
until we're on a
officially less
plane.
than 24. Like this
Oh,
time tomorrow, like there'll be a nice cocktail on a plane by this time.
yes. Can't wait. But until then,
Let's
what
work.
are we thinking? Yeah, right? Do we have to? Yes, we have to. Okay, so let's get excited. Let's do it. Let's go.
So today's topic is not a new one, but it's an important one.
Mm-hmm.
And with the drum roll, that wasn't very twirly. But anyway, we're going to talk about workplace culture assessments. And you're like, oh, thought it was going to be something real sexy. But at least the sexy results when you do it well.
Yeah, if you're doing well, yeah, you can get.
It could get real sexy in an appropriate workplace kind of way.
Right. Not in a weird way. Not in a weird,
behind closed doors way.
Exactly. Where you can get into a harassment suit. Not that kind of way. Not that kind of
definitely not inviting sexual harassment at work.
No.
But sexy is not that. And look, the reason why we are back to talk about assessments is the workplace and the world have changed dramatically since you probably did your last engagement survey, pulse check survey, any kind of survey. It is really important to get out there and understand what's going on. So since we're queens of shared language, why don't we start there? What is an assessment exactly?
Great place to start because it varies, right? Like we've had this debate amongst our team recently in terms of how you even define an assessment. And for us, it really is about the process of both gathering the data and analyzing the data, and then getting to a sense of understanding what's going on within the organization so that you can make the appropriate recommendations. So it's like a 3-phase, 3-part step, like process to an assessment. Other folks on our team kind of defined it as like an SAT score, an ACT score, any of those standardized tests where they're looking for a number or something at the end of taking this assessment or this test. But for us, it's much deeper and broader than that, because if you don't have the context for said number, if you get a number, we don't even know what to do with it. So for us, it's a bigger process that we think is more appropriate for the workplace.
And I think that was such an interesting dialogue we ended up having internally about, because it was funny because I felt like you and I were like assessment is just this. And then It was like, and we were kind of indignant about it. Like, why are we talking about what an assessment is? Don't we all know what an assessment is? But then it was interesting to get the other view of, well, an assessment suggests a score comes at the end. And when I was thinking about that, it sort of opened up for me how we've been trained to be scored since like kindergarten, right? Mm. You get 100 on the test or a 90 on a test, or you got an A, or you're a straight A student. And all of those sort of numbers or grading or scoring are a demarcation of like where you fit in life. Are you good? Are you excellent? Are you underperforming, right? And so we understand that, business leaders like to have those gauges. And I think sometimes, because we don't come and tell you yet, it's coming, that you rank here, I think it makes it really hard for leaders to know if they're doing a good or a bad job. What's your reflection on that?
Yeah, that's, it's interesting because as you were talking about that, what came up for me is that we're always looking to compare ourselves, just in general, to that point of, okay, how are you in relation to your peers? Are you above average? Are you below, like you were stating? But it's like, for us, yeah, that's nice. It's good to know if you want to, make those but it speaks to the news headlines and the PR and the press in terms of how you want to brand yourself. But what does that really mean? And I don't think that part of it, that means nothing. So what, that you're whatever, classification you want to give yourself, if internally it's still a mess. And so I think the point of using these assessments is really to understand what's going on so that you're in competition with yourself. So that we want to show these improvements here because we know we want to be better in this area, not necessarily to say that we're better than so and so. What does that matter if that doesn't translate within your organization? So I think it's important to really provide the right context for these assessments. And it really isn't about anybody else. It's really about what's going on with you.
So let's talk about that though for a second, because you just brilliantly explained that. We brilliantly explained that. But there's always some emptiness you can tell with the leader, right? Like there's still but how good are we? And I think the point that I just want to hammer home from what Shanté was sharing is that you're only as good as your people think you are. So if you have a great place to work designation because somebody in HR did a really great job of filling out a survey, right? And kind of a slight to these raters and rankers, because it's such a hollow designation, like the great place to work, like based on what one person, and as someone who's filled them out, it's typically one person filling them out and gathering the information to fill it out. If that's your guard, like it's hollow, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's not coming from your people. And so what we hope that you will take away from this is, sure, we have the ability to put you in the rankings of our clients, right? We've gone through enormous lengths to rank every single one of our clients based on various important factors like change management, technology availability, resource availability, to understand like how positioned they are to improve their workplace culture. But that's also still like not the true gauge. The true gauge is in your own numbers. Do people want to work here? Do people respect what you're selling in terms of your vision, your mission, your leadership behaviors? Right. And look, we're willing to pivot and give some room for a score, but we also want people to be more thoughtful of, what does the score mean actually? Like, get beyond just a score and a gold star that you're a good boy or a good girl or a good them, like that's.
And I think it's just a singular point in time, right? So it's okay. Yeah, that's what that is now, but that may not mean anything 6 months from now. That may not mean anything a year from now, which to me makes this, it's really important to constantly assess. Constantly get in touch with what's happening with your organization, and especially as it relates to workplace culture today. And we're DEI experts, so we're always going to bring that lens into it. It has to be something that's continuous. It has to be something that's ongoing, because it gets us away from, we did it right? We hit the destination, we got to the place. No. It's people are entering and leaving your organization all the time. Different generations are coming up. You have to constantly have a handle on the pulse of your organization, and you can't just do that one time. So you really got to be mindful of that, and that the impact that these kinds of assessments really have on culture is more of the important thing here than necessarily the one score, the 1 point in time that you're measuring these things.
So what you're getting at is why they're important.
Yeah.
Things change, and they change quickly. So even doing whatever you might call it, an engagement survey, a workplace culture survey, a pulse survey, a DEI survey, whatever you're calling the survey, I would argue that once a year is not even enough. Because if you think about, if we use 2024 as an example, and for whatever reason, it seems like people tend to either do these assessments in April or September. Like it's either like in the spring or right in the fall. Well, if that was your company's cadence and you did those surveys either in April or September of last year, it was before we had an election. So I would say it's irrelevant. Right. Like anything before the election is irrelevant. Right. And this idea, it's the same way I feel about performance reviews. Telling someone officially once a year how they're doing is arcane, because how could they, especially if they had performance issues for part of the year, So you're waiting until one time to give them. So it's this piece of, we have to get out of, frankly, like the 90s, where things didn't change in the workplace so quickly. And you might be able to get away with once a year on some of these things and be cognizant of the times that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
Your people data consistently has to be a mirror to your business decisions.
Yes, absolutely. And it's always funny to me when we hear from leadership and they're just like, they're surprised by what comes out of the data. Like, oh, it didn't occur to us this way, or we didn't think it was this. Well, that's why you do it, because y'all don't know. You don't know.
And we disconnected. And we were so blessed this morning, y'all, because we got to have breakfast with an amazing client and his wife. And we did ask to be adopted by them at the end of the breakfast. But I don't know that they thought we were serious, because we were really serious when we made the adoption request.
They kind of chuckled and laughed us off, but I'm like, they don't know us. We're persistent.
We're gonna come to them with our papers, our official
adoption papers. All right.
But he was talking about this. He was like, I have a job. He's like, I have so much respect for the work you guys do. Like, he was talking about some amazing work you did, because of course I had to be like, oh, it was her. But this amazing work you did on like a governance charter that was just so meticulous. And he was like, we would have never gotten there without you guys, because we're not experts in this, right? And so it's that piece where we're never saying to leaders, you need to know all these things so fluently. But what we are saying is you need to be open to reality. You need to be open to the mirror. You need to not come at us like, well, I didn't see it that way. Okay, well, you didn't have people who are experts in people data talking to you about it either. And that's okay also, right? So it's like, we're not coming in here to try to bop you over the head and say you missed the whole point in the plot. We're helping to show you what the plot is. And I think if leaders can get a little bit more comfortable with the not knowing and developing a habit to know better, like, that's the win. Because unless you plan on going out of business in a year, you're going to have to keep making change. There is no destination, to your point.
There's no destination. But what is that? I mean, is it, in your opinion, what drives that? That either the ostriching, not wanting to know, or the getting stuck in it? Like, we've done it this one time, this is what it is, and so this is what it's going to continue to be, right? Like, where you can just ride off of this into the sunset. Like, what is it behind that thinking that trips leaders up when it comes to really understanding people data and culture?
Because this is the place where it's hardest not to take things personally, right? So some of it is just really ego driven. Okay. So that's number one to me. And number two is that for at least most of my life, leaders are supposed to know all the answers. Like, that's at least how it's portrayed, right? And so if you're coming to someone with something that's not their expertise, telling them they're not doing it that well, that also ties back into the ego to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree 100% on it's an ego thing. And I think it's hard for, in addition to the personal and the ego, it's also hard to really get a grasp on people things. Right? When you're solving other types of business problems, it's a lot easier for you to kind of detach from it's very binary. You can see it in black and white. You can see it as, this is right, this is wrong, this is a problem, this is not a problem. We can put resources here, we can not put resources there. But when you're dealing with people, it gets a little messy and it gets a little nuanced. And I don't know if, and unfortunately, we don't see leadership development as forward as it needs to be in order to be able to handle this properly. So it gets challenging for folks when you're not accustomed to or trained to be able to handle people and people data and culture, because it's tough. It's hard. It's not a regular business.
And I think the thing that could make it a little bit less tough, and what I mean by that is I think a lot of times leaders are resisting reality because it is so uncomfortable. And so then there is a lot of like, well, if I just tell you it's not that way, then you'll stop telling me we need to do these things. But some of it is like backward, because I know I sound like a broken record saying this, but most businesses still need human beings to do the work that you see so clearly on the page, right? Well, you're talking about, oh, numbers are down. gotta fix that. Numbers are up. Yeah, like all those things, but it's humans who help impact the numbers being up and down. So you almost are unqualified for your job if you're resistant to understanding what's happening with the people. And I saw her face. I said unqualified. She's ready. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
No,
Go
I
ahead.
think
I'm not even going to finish that thought because I saw
I
your
think
face.
to that point again, it's the development. There's a level of resilience. There's a level of tough skin that you have to be a leader. That that is, you don't just get that. You don't just, that's just not how people are, right? Like you need to be developed and you need to grow into that and you need to be trained, right, to become a really good leader. And so, to your point of saying, like, we see it all the time where people are just put in these leadership roles and they don't have the skills really to be leaders. We just heard that story today again with the contact that we had breakfast with, how they're grooming someone or working with someone to assume a certain level within the organization, but he's like, that person is not a good leader, and he doesn't have the self-awareness to realize where his gaps are in order to be a good leader, right? So it's like you're dealing with a very challenging situation. So it's how do you reconcile that and make that work where you are called to show up in a certain way within an organization and to be able to manage this properly, but you don't have the skills. Like, how do you even reconcile that in order to be able to do something with information that you get out of an assessment?
I think take bite-sized pieces, right? I think that particularly if you're a newer leader or you're new to trying to understand people as a leader, right? Like, meaning this doesn't feel like a natural like habit or skill set for you, and just start small, right? Like we've talked to several CEOs that have been we've helped to onboard several CEOs to companies, new companies, and like our thing is very simple. Find 3 questions, like make sure, especially for smaller organizations, like maybe you only have about 50 employees, make your way to meet all 50 employees and ask each of them like the same 3 questions. You have some here in your notes that were good. Like, do you feel heard at work? Do you feel valued? What's one thing we could do better? Like, those are 3. If you had, and it doesn't have to be those 3 questions, but if you get into the habit of having those, like sometimes it's like a 15-minute conversation with people, make office hours, invite people to come talk to you, invite them to have those conversations. You start to get to know what's happening on your team. You start to get to know the personalities. And then that helps you understand how to craft messages, how to manage, how to be thoughtful of people. I'm in the middle of doing an investigation right now where the way that the allegations have been presented, there are 2 people that are viewed as bullies. And it's been really fascinating because I am now 4 people into those interviews, how each person shows up. First person was like, I don't know why I'm here, so I don't know that I'm comfortable talking to you. Okay, no problem, right? I don't tell people why they're talking to me on purpose, right? Because I need to understand like their real reactions to things. But okay, I can give you some context now. That softened her, and then she gave me all kinds of information roadmap wise. The next person I talked to was waiting to tell me everything there was to tell me, right? Like it was like I could have just said hello and she would have just poured into the whole story, and there's that. And then the third person was really reserved. And what I took away from that person is they didn't want to say anything bad. And every time she said something, well, I'm not saying he's a bad person, right? So that was like, oh, her giving constructive feedback to her makes her feel guilty, right? And then the fourth person was somewhere in the middle, but by the end, live. I'm tired. I don't have time to keep dealing with this kind of treatment. I'll quit. I'm old. I'm too old for this. So went from being somewhat reserved because she's, well, I don't want to just make this event session. I'm like, you can tell me whatever you want to tell me. And the reason why I'm even using that as an example is if I showed up with them exactly the same way, I wouldn't get information from them, right? I had to be thoughtful and much quicker than you leaders do, because you guys see people you work with day in and day out. This is within minutes. I have to see who's showing up to my interview so that I can get information from them. That first woman, if I was like, well, you have to talk to me, then she wouldn't talk to me, right? I had to be, okay, she's got a wall up and this is uncomfortable. So what do I need to do to help her feel safe? It was giving her as much information as I could, right? And I don't have to do that most of the time, but in that one, okay, fine. So when you bring it back to this, obviously I'm a very skilled investigator and this is years and years of training, but the point I'm making there is I don't go into any situation thinking my one approach is going to work with everybody I interact with. And that's all we're really saying here is that it's not a one size fits all to how you lead people because everybody needs something slightly different. And you can't necessarily become an expert in everyone on your team, but you can at least become an expert in asking good questions to understand how you're encountering people.
Right. Because that's the whole point of all this, right? It's to ask the right questions to get the right information to make the right decisions.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so it's that's why it's important because I can imagine people are like, but why do we need to know this? And why is it important to dig into this topic? It's because it's important for you to understand what's happening with your people so that because it determines what the culture that you have in your organization, determines whether or not people want to stay, determines the level of performance that you get out of people, and it just spirals like that. So it's like if anything, take away that you really need to dig in to this information and what's going on in your organization and get the support and help that you need. Call us, right? But it's important, especially now as the world has changed so much. You really got to understand what's going on with your people.
So in 2 minutes, walk us through an assessment process and some of the follow-ups that people should be thoughtful of when they do these assessments.
Sure. I think first and foremost, what are you trying to understand, right? Like maybe you've gotten some anecdotal feedback, you've heard some things, some rumblings, and you're trying to really understand what's really going on in your organization. So start from that perspective of what's there. If you're doing like a spot thing, right? Like some of these are bigger employee engagement things that happen regularly and are more broad. These are broader questions where you want to get a sense of what's happening in general in the organization. But even if you're taking yourself outside of that constant routine of an engagement survey, something may have come up within that you want to do a little bit more.
But even in that, even if it's a habit, why? Like, why are you? I think it's important to just call out here. I mean, we've actually said to clients, if you're not prepared, if you haven't acted on the last set of feedback, don't keep asking people for current feedback, right? Like sometimes there's a reason not to do it, not to do a survey if you haven't made any actual progress on the last one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you promised that you were going to do something with those results, but you just didn't get around to it, maybe you aren't doing it annually or every 6 months, right? I think cadence is important to have your why around, even if you normally do the surveys.
Yeah, and for it to make sense for your business, for your organization, if you know that you move slow, because a lot of organizations do, fine. That's okay. It's okay.
Be self-aware.
Right? Exactly. That's totally fine. Then to your point, don't do it frequently if you know that you're not in a position to be able to affect change in the time frame that you think that folks within your organization think is responsive, right? Just be upfront about it. But once you determine what that is, you really want to figure out what you're trying to assess and make sure that you're setting up your framework to be able to get to that. So what questions are you asking? How many questions are you asking? What is the medium in which you're asking these questions, right? Like, how are you designing this in order to get the richest data from this process? And then once you go through that, you're going to pull in your people who know how to do this, your HR people, your data people, your culture people, like whoever, your DEI people, whoever in your organization help you figure this out, pull in those resources. Don't just go out here writing a survey on your own without getting some advice, please. Thanks. So you're right. So get the right people in the room, design it the way it needs to be designed, go out, gather the data. Once you get the data, analyze it. Again, pulling in the right resources to analyze the data. What are you hearing? Some analysis doesn't need a heavy lift. It can be a quick, I don't know, any of these programs out here. It can be anything as simple as chat to something as more difficult as like Python and MaxQDA and all these different tools, whatever makes sense for your organization. But again, get the right people in the room to do it. And then what does it say? Have a chance to really digest it. What is this information telling you? who needs to be in the room to talk about these things and actually schedule those meetings. Don't just go through this process and just have this report sitting out here and y'all haven't talked about it, because that also happens. Haven't made
Oh,
time to
I
really
had a
go
whole
through the data.
CHRO who you know this story. This is crazy. Like, I did an investigation for this company almost 3 years ago. They came back last year because the same issues that I investigated reappeared, which means they just never went away. And I had given them like a quasi assessment report where we had analyzed the data like through the coding process. And the CHRO who they hired wasn't like he was hired shortly after that report had been given. And in our interview, because you and I interviewed him together, he showed us the sealed envelope with said report that I wrote over 2 years ago that he had never opened to read. And you're like, what? Like, that report gave you the secret to today.
Like, we didn't even have to be here. We didn't even have to get to this point because y'all had it for 2 years.
But, in a sealed envelope. That was wild.
What good does it do in the sealed envelope? Like, that doesn't help anybody.
The message is going to seep through the paper. Isn't that what teachers used to say in the 90s? You're not going to learn by osmosis, right? Like, it's like, what?
Sleeping with the book on top of your head. But anyway, that's an aside.
Yeah, so, but as we sort of close this episode out, like, we get to this point. Number one, we all live in whatever this bizarre world is that we are in right now. You know it, you feel it, you wake up every day wondering what the heck is going on. Think your employees are thinking the same thing too. So it is really important to be really in tune with what's happening in your workplace relative to the changes you're able to or willing to make, right? So again, we think it's important to regularly get feedback, but regularly needs to be defined by how fast your company moves or doesn't, and being upfront with people about what you're trying to understand and what you hope to do with that information. If you're new to understanding people, whether it's because you're new to your role or you're new to trying to figure it out, find no more than 3 good questions to start off your working relationships or reset your working relationships with people who report to you. It's important to do that so you can understand how to best get the work out of the people who work for you, right? Because everybody needs something different. And then the last piece is make sure you have the right voices in the room helping you to understand what this information means, right? So to Shanté's point, your data analytics people who can translate the people data, because it can be pretty stark to see some of these results, especially when they get segmented by, departments or level in the organization or race or ethnicity, to understand how people are showing up. And a lot of times, if this is not your true expertise, you'll start jumping to conclusions and get defensive. So let folks who really understand this data help you. It does not make you weak or a poor leader if you don't, are not an expert in people data. And of course, call us, because this is what we do and we're happy to help. But look, we're in a situation where we still need human beings to do jobs at these companies, to help jobs make this money. So be thoughtful of your human beings, as you move forward.
And speaking of being thoughtful, you have to communicate with them. So you can't just stop at knowing what the data says and that's it. You have to put a plan together and you have to communicate it, which is where the whole change management part of this comes in, but that's a whole other episode. But don't just sit on it, and be respectful of people and let them know, especially if you ask them, tell them what's going to happen and what they're going to do, what you're going to do about it, and actually follow through.
Gosh, I really feel like that's so obvious, but you're right. So let's add that.
Okay. Now we've been in many a situation where that didn't happen.
All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back. We're on all of the channels: YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify. Just find us, please. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. Tell us what you want to talk about. We're into it, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Here it is. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership. That's the deal when you know what you're dealing with. Learn how to lead and stay focused.